In this lesson, we'll begin removing the sky and enhancing the skyline of our image. Okay, so in the previous lesson, we cropped in on our image to this high definition aspect ratio, and what I'd like to do at this point is let's go ahead and get rid of the sky in our image here. Now, we have a pretty crisp line that we have to go off of, kind of silhouetting the building here. So this shouldn't be too difficult. So there's a number of different ways to create a selection or even a mask here inside of Photoshop. For this particular instance, I'm going to jump over here and click on my lasso tool and hold down. And I'm going to come in and grab the magnetic lasso tool. So what this tool is going to try and do is it's going to try and automatically snap to a predefined edge in the image. And the edge in this image being the edge along the silhouette of our building. So I'm just simply going to click right over here somewhere. Let's go ahead and click maybe right here. And I'm just going to start dragging. And I'm going to do this kind of slowly. You can see here that it's trying to chop off the corner of that building. So what we can do is we can hit the backspace key to basically have it try again. So I'm going to come up a little bit and see if we can't get it to kind of pick up on that edge. Now this may not work perfectly. We may have to come in and do a little bit of touch up, but you can see here it's doing a pretty fair job of making a selection around the edge of our building. So I'm just going to come in here, and when I get to a point where I'm out of room, I'm just simply going to hold my spacebar and pan, just like so. Release, and we'll just continue making our selection. Pan again. And again, this tool is picking up on that silhouette that we're going for. So now we're going to get over here to more of a complex region. So it may have a little bit more of an issue with this, but so far so good. Just kind of picking up along here. Now I'm going to come in and we're just going to kind of bring this off to the side like so. And let me just zoom out at this point by holding Control, Alt, and Spacebar, clicking a couple times. So I'm going to release those keys, and then we're just going to bring this up and around. We're going to get the whole sky here, just in an effort to get back to kind of the area where we started. And when we get back to where we started, we should see that little circle next to our cursor. So I'll just click on the point we started on, and that'll complete our selection. Now, before we make our mask, I'm going to come in and I'm going to kind of clean this up a little bit. Let me go ahead and grab my normal lasso tool. And you can see here we missed that corner. So I'll hold Shift and add to that selection. Do the same thing right down here. And I may come in here and just kind of fill in that little gap right there. You need to subtract from the selection by holding Alt right along in there. It looks like it picked up on that window in the building. But for the most part, it did a pretty respectable job here. So let's kind of come in and just, again, make sure that we're happy with the selection as it currently is. We actually subtract from the selection there. Looks like the edge of the building got a little bit blended with the sky behind it. And we'll go ahead and add to the selection right there, get that little piece of that taller building out of it. All right, so far so good. And now here's where the selection fell short just a bit. So let's come in here and subtract from the selection here. Just get that edge of the building. Get that little goober out of there as well. Now this area over here, we're probably going to end up covering up anyway, so it's not super important, but I am going to come down and just sort of do this. Just add a selection sort of like that. All right, great. So we've made a selection of the entire sky here, with the exception of that corner, which I'll add. And now we need to mask this off. So I've got my base image selected over here, and the layer mask button is right down here at the bottom of the layers panel. But we can't just click on this button as it is, because if we do, it's going to mask off the building and not the sky. So what we need to do instead, let me undo that with a Control Z, is come over here and hold down our Alt key and click on the layer mask button. So if I do that, then it's going to create a mask of what I have selected. It's going to hide the selection. And in this case, we have now gotten rid of our sky. So this is really great. This is exactly what we're looking for. Now, at this point, we've got our buildings. Let's go ahead and bring those back. And I'm just going to drag that underneath my base image. And I tell you what, let's just go ahead and Control G and group our base image into its own group here. We'll just call it base image. Okay, great. And now at this point, what I'd like to do is I'd like to add some buildings to this skyline. The city I live in doesn't have a super impressive downtown skyline. The buildings just aren't that tall for the most part. So I'm going to go ahead and borrow some buildings from another city. I've got here in your project files, if you go to the images folder, and inside that folder look in city, you'll see this image right here. This was shot in downtown Chicago. So there's a lot more buildings here to choose from. Now, obviously, we don't want all of these buildings. We don't want to completely overpower the skyline here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select a few buildings. Let's come over here and use a different lasso. Let's come and grab this polygonal lasso tool. And this will help us make some straight selections. All we need to do is click with this one. Let's grab this big tall building right here. So I'll come over here and just sort of, I'm not actually going to grab whatever that tall thing is on top of it. We'll just come in sort of like so, make a few clicks around, and make a selection of this building here. So we just want to, again, go back to the place we started and then click again, and that'll complete our selection. So let me go ahead and copy that with a Control C, come back over to our image here, and let's select our buildings layer and just Control V to paste. And you can see here, if I grab my selection tool by hitting V, we now have this nice tall building here. So we'll go ahead and drag this one in and maybe stick it in behind for right now. We'll go ahead and organize those a little bit better in a moment. But let's come back over to our Chicago skyline and grab a couple more. I'm going to deselect that by hitting Control D, and let's grab this building right here. Now, as I'm selecting these buildings, I'm looking for buildings that are relatively tall, but we're also going to grab some that are of average height in this particular image. But I'm not concerned with finding images of buildings that are extremely radical in terms of the architecture. I don't want these buildings in the skyline to be more interesting than the arena that is the subject of our image. So we'll come over, copy that one, paste it in as well. If I hold down the Control key, I can access my Move tool again, and we'll just kind of move that one up. Let's come over and let's see, which other buildings do we want here? How about some of these smaller buildings right here? Let's come in and maybe grab maybe some of these right here. We'll just come in, grab from here up. Just sort of like so. Not going to grab that little antenna there. And let's come down. Maybe grab this building as well. We'll just bring that selection on down. All right, great. So again, copy that last set of buildings, and we'll paste that in. And you can see that's behind our arena, so we'll just drag that up. Now, at this point, it's all about positioning these buildings in a manner that is pleasing to our composition. Now, the whole point of bringing in these buildings is to sort of frame the composition. So I want to put these kind of on the right side and the left side. We talked about that building being in the center and kind of the downside to having that there. But before we start positioning these too much, let's go ahead and hide our base image group here. And let's pick out one of our buildings. So let's pick out a relatively simple one. We'll grab this one right here. And I'm simply going to grab my eraser tool with the keyboard shortcut E, and we'll just right click and grab a hard round brush right there. Now, typically you would want to use a mask for this type of thing, but being that we just copied and pasted these buildings, I'm not too concerned with making sure that these pixels that I'm about to erase are masked off. So what I want to do is come in and clean these up. And this brush is a little bit large. If I right-click and Alt at the same time, I can drag right and left and dynamically increase and decrease the size of my eraser. But I'm going to come over here and click once, getting this circle right about there, kind of touching the edge of that building, and I'll click once there, and I want to hold Shift, and then I want to click right down here. And you can see we shaved a portion of that extra data off there, and we'll just kind of keep clicking Shift. Now this base down here I'm not too concerned about because that's actually going to be hidden behind our arena, but we'll come down here, click down there, Shift, click up there. Now when you get into these little corners up here, it may be a little more difficult to kind of shave that information away. Just undo, sort of like that. Sometimes it requires a couple undos to make sure that you're not actually chopping some of the building off, or making sure that you've placed those little dots in the exact right spots. So we'll come in here, just kind of shave that off. So really what we're concerned with right now, more so than the actual details of the building, is kind of the silhouettes of the building, because we're going to be pushing these buildings back into the distance later on in this course, and we definitely won't be seeing all the detail that we currently see in them. So we'll just come in here like that, finish cleaning that particular building up. Okay, great. So we've got that building cleaned up, and what I want to go ahead and do is clean the rest of these buildings up in a very similar manner. And I'm going to go ahead and begin positioning these buildings. Now we can position them using our Move tool, just simply by dragging them around our canvas. And we can also position their stacking order in our Layers panel, just simply by clicking and dragging them up and down here. Let's see if I can find... Yep, there's our original building there. Now, I'm also going to possibly be flipping some of these buildings horizontally, which let's just grab that same building we worked with. If I wanted to flip a building horizontally in terms of basically I like the way it looks flipped better, I can do that by coming up to Edit, Transform, and Flip Horizontal. And that'll flip whatever the contents of the currently selected layer I have, it'll flip them horizontally. So if I undo a couple times, flip that building back and forth, you can kind of see. Now with this building, it doesn't make a big difference, but with this large cluster of buildings over here, I actually don't know if I like this taller building being on the inside. I might want that on the outside. So I may flip that horizontal as well as clean that up. So in between lessons, go ahead and clean your buildings up and begin kind of placing them around our base image in a manner that is compositionally pleasing and that is framing of the image. If you need to make some of the buildings larger or smaller, feel free to just come up to Edit and choose Free Transform, and then you can grab these controls here and hold Shift and increase and decrease, scale up and down those individual buildings, just like so. These buildings are kind of small. I may scale those up as well. So when you come back in the next lesson, what I'd like to focus on is correcting the lens distortion here on the sides of our building, as well as maybe knocking some big chunks out of this top edge. So we'll get started with that in the next lesson.